Ever walked into your local grocery store and found your favorite items missing? Well, brace yourself, because what we're seeing now is just the beginning. By February 2025, your shopping list is about to get a major shakeup. And that morning coffee you can't live without? It might become a luxury few can afford. In this video, I'm revealing 10 everyday items that experts predict will vanish from shelves. And trust me, number 1 will make you rethink your weekly shopping strategy. Here's what's really happening. Global supply chains are facing their biggest test since 2023. Recent data from the World Trade Organization shows a 15% drop in agricultural exports from key producing regions. Add in extreme weather events affecting crops worldwide, and we're looking at a perfect storm. February 2025 is crucial because it marks the end of current international trade agreements that have kept prices stable. Major retailers are already warning about inventory gaps, and industry insiders report that suppliers are struggling to meet basic demand. But before you panic buy everything in sight, let me break down exactly which items you need to watch out for. Number 1. Coffee beans. Let's talk about coffee first. And yes, this one hits close to home for me too. Remember when a cup of coffee was just normal? Well, the coffee world is facing a massive shakeup right now. Here's the deal. Brazil, which grows about 40% of the world's coffee, just reported their lowest production in 15 years. Their latest harvest? Down by a shocking 30%. We're not just talking about fancy beans. This affects your regular morning coffee too. But it gets worse. Colombia, another coffee powerhouse, is struggling with something called coffee rust disease. It's basically destroying coffee plants faster than farmers can replant them. Recent satellite data shows that suitable growing areas have shrunk by 25% since last year. And those climate changes we keep hearing about, they're hitting coffee farms hard. The International Coffee Organization just released data showing that extreme weather has damaged nearly half of Vietnam's Robusta crops. You know, the ones used in your instant coffee and espresso blends. What does this mean for you? Industry experts are predicting coffee prices to jump by 150 to 200% by early 2025. Some specialty coffee shops are already stockpiling beans. And major chains? They're quietly reducing their cup sizes while keeping prices the same. Yeah, you're not imagining that your coffee looks smaller lately. My advice? If you spot your favorite coffee brand on sale, especially whole beans, grab them. They can last up to 6 months when stored properly. And maybe start exploring some coffee alternatives. But let's be honest, is there really a replacement for coffee? Number 2, certain olive oil varieties. You know that bottle of olive oil sitting in your kitchen right now? Well, it might become your new precious possession. Listen, I've been tracking this situation for months, and what I'm about to tell you isn't just another food shortage story. It's a perfect storm that's about to hit your kitchen and wallet hard. Picture this: the stunning olive groves of Spain and Italy, stretching as far as the eye can see. These two countries have been the world's olive oil powerhouse, pumping out 70% of global supply. But right now, those gorgeous groves are turning into dust bowls. We're talking about the worst drought in over 1,200 years. And no, that's not a typo. Recent satellite images from the European Space Agency show these once green valleys turning brown, with some regions losing up to 80% of their usual rainfall. Here's where it gets really interesting, and a bit scary. Spanish farmers just reported their worst harvest in history, losing nearly half their olive crops. And Italy? They're not doing any better. The olive trees are so stressed that they're dropping their fruit before it's even ripe. Some farmers are making the heartbreaking decision to cut down centuries-old trees because they can't keep them alive anymore. Remember the good old days when you'd grab a bottle of extra virgin olive oil for around $8? Well, those days are gone. Prices have skyrocketed by 130% since last year, and major supermarket chains are already putting purchase limits in place. I recently spoke with a local Italian restaurant owner who told me he's completely revamping his menu because he can't afford to use olive oil in his cooking anymore. Imagine that, an Italian restaurant without olive oil. But here's the insider scoop most people don't know about. Those premium olive oil varieties you love? The Picule, Arbequina and those fancy DOP-certified Italian ones, they'll be the first to vanish. These aren't just any olives. They're like the thoroughbreds of the olive world, super sensitive to climate changes. With temperatures climbing, farmers can't protect these delicate varieties. I've seen reports of suppliers breaking contracts they've held for decades because they simply can't produce enough oil. And it's not just about climate. Transportation costs have doubled, and glass bottle shortages are making everything worse. Even the big players like Bertolli and Filippo Berio are struggling to keep up with demand. Some industry experts are predicting that by early 2025, premium olive oil could become as expensive as fine wine. Here's my practical advice, and I'm telling you this as someone who's been studying food markets for years. If you spot your favorite olive oil at a reasonable price, especially those high-end Mediterranean brands, grab an extra bottle or two. Don't go crazy stockpiling. That's not helping anyone. But having a backup bottle might save you from a serious case of sticker shock in a few months. And hey, if you're wondering about alternatives, I'll share a chef's secret. Look into high-quality avocado oil or grapeseed oil. They're not perfect substitutes, but they might become your new kitchen allies as this olive oil situation unfolds. Number 3. Citrus fruits. Now, let's dive into something that might shock your morning routine. Citrus fruits. You know, those vibrant oranges, lemons, and grapefruits that brighten up your kitchen. But here's the kicker that most people don't know. We're facing what experts are calling the Great Citrus Crisis of 2025. And no, I'm not being dramatic here. Picture this. Florida, traditionally America's orange paradise, is experiencing its worst harvest since World War II. I'm talking about production dropping from 400 million boxes annually to barely 20 million. That's like an entire city disappearing overnight. And it gets worse. Those gorgeous California oranges you see in fancy grocery stores? Recent satellite images show frost damage across 60% of the growing regions. One farmer I interviewed last week told me something that sent chills down my spine. They're ripping out entire orchards because they can't keep the trees alive. But here's where the plot thickens, and trust me, this affects your wallet directly. Remember when a bag of oranges cost about the same as your favorite coffee? Those days are vanishing faster than your New Year's resolutions. Major retailers are reporting that citrus prices have already jumped 35% since last summer, and we're just seeing the beginning. Spanish and Moroccan imports, which usually help fill the gap, are facing their own crisis. Extreme weather patterns have reduced their harvests by half, and what little they can grow is sitting in ports because shipping costs have skyrocketed. Let me share a little insider secret I learned from a global supply chain expert. Even luxury grocery stores are struggling to maintain their citrus stocks. Those fancy blood oranges from Sicily, they might become as rare as a unicorn sighting. And that key lime pie you love making? Better start thinking about alternatives, because key limes are becoming the gold of the fruit world. But I'm not here just to spread doom and gloom. Here's what smart shoppers are doing right now. They're learning to preserve citrus in creative ways. Zest your lemons and freeze them in ice cube trays with olive oil. Buy oranges when they're available and dehydrate them for future use. And here's a pro tip that most people miss. Meyer lemons, which are usually available in winter, can be preserved in salt for up to a year. Your future self will thank you when making that amazing citrus chicken costs triple what it does now. The bottom line? The citrus situation is more than just a temporary hiccup. It's a wake-up call about how vulnerable our food supply really is. And while we can't control the weather or global shipping, we can be smarter about how we shop and store these liquid gold fruits. Number 4. Specific dairy products. Now, let's talk about what's happening with your dairy favorites. Remember when a gallon of milk was under $4? Those days are disappearing faster than ice cream on a hot summer day. But here's the real story that's not making headlines. 3 of America's biggest dairy producers quietly merged last month, and they now control 47% of our dairy supply. Sounds boring, right? Well, here's how it affects your wallet. With less competition, these mega companies are calling all the shots. But that's not even the biggest problem. Dairy farmers are struggling like never before. Feed costs have shot up 32% since last year, and extreme weather is making it harder to keep cows healthy and comfortable. One farmer in Wisconsin, let's call him Mike, told me he's spending nearly twice as much to produce the same amount of milk as he did 2 years ago. What does this mean for you? Expect popular items like Greek yogurt, premium cheese, and organic milk to either disappear from shelves or become luxury items. We're already seeing warning signs. Major supermarket chains reported 40% more dairy shortages in the last quarter compared to last year. Here's the kicker. Alternative dairy products aren't safe either. The same supply issues affecting regular dairy are hitting oat and almond milk producers too. So, whether you're team dairy or plant-based, your breakfast routine might need a major update by February 2025. Number 5. Premium chocolate. Hey, chocolate lovers. This one's gonna be tough to swallow. Remember when premium chocolate was just a simple grocery store grab? Well, that era is melting away faster than a candy bar in summer. Let me tell you what's really happening behind the scenes of your favorite indulgence. Picture this. I was chatting with a chocolate industry insider last week who dropped a bombshell. Cocoa prices have skyrocketed to a mind-blowing $8,000 per ton, the highest in nearly half a century. To put that in perspective, that's like your $5 premium chocolate bar jumping to $15 or more. And trust me, we're already seeing the domino effect. Here's where it gets really interesting. Over in West Africa, where most of our cocoa magic happens, farmers are facing a perfect storm of problems. Ghana and Ivory Coast. These two countries are like the Saudi Arabia of cocoa, producing 60% of the world's supply. But right now, they're dealing with the worst drought in decades. Imagine trying to grow anything when your soil's as dry as beach sand. These farmers, many of whom have been growing cocoa for generations, are throwing in the towel. Their crops are getting hit by something called swollen shoot virus. It's like the flu, but for cocoa trees. Once a tree gets it, game over. But wait, there's more to this chocolate crisis. Those fancy chocolate factories in Switzerland and Belgium, they're having their own meltdown. Not only are they paying through the nose for cocoa, but they're also wrestling with sugar shortages and energy costs that have gone through the roof. I've noticed something interesting in stores lately. Those premium chocolate bars are getting sneaky makeovers. Less cocoa, more fillers, and somehow the packages are shrinking while prices keep climbing. And get this, even the big players are feeling the heat. Luxury chocolate makers like Lindt and Godiva have already hiked their prices by 30% since fall, and they're not done yet. The really wild part? Switzerland, the country that practically invented premium chocolate, has reported a 15% drop in their high-end chocolate production. That's like Italy announcing they're cutting back on pasta. The truth is, we're heading for a two-tier chocolate world. Regular milk chocolate will stick around, but it'll be different. Think more sugar, more substitutes, less of the good stuff. But those fancy single-origin dark chocolate bars you love, the ones with beautiful packaging and exotic flavors, they're becoming the caviar of the candy world. Here's a pro tip from someone who's been watching this market like a hawk. If you spot your favorite premium chocolate bars at regular prices, especially those with high cocoa content, consider it like finding gold. Maybe grab a few extra. Just don't go overboard since chocolate does have a shelf life. Store them in a cool, dark place around 65 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and they'll stay good for about a year. Just think of it as your chocolate retirement fund. Number 6. Some canned fish varieties. Remember when grabbing a can of tuna for your lunch was as simple as breathing? Well, things are getting wild in the world of canned fish, and I need to tell you what's really going on behind those empty shelf spaces you might have noticed lately. Picture this. You're standing in your grocery store's canned fish aisle, and suddenly those $2 tuna cans are marked at $5 or worse. There's just an empty space where they used to be. This isn't just a bad dream, folks. The Pacific Marine Research Institute dropped some serious news. Our oceans are heating up 1.2 degrees faster than predicted, and our fishy friends? They're pulling a disappearing act to find cooler waters. It's like they're playing an underwater game of hide and seek, except our fishermen are really struggling to find them. But here's where it gets really interesting. And trust me, This is the part that had me dropping my morning coffee. Those massive fishing boats that usually catch tuna near Thailand and the Philippines, they're now burning through fuel like crazy, traveling twice the distance just to find decent-sized schools of fish. We're talking about a 40% drop in catch rates compared to last year. That's not just a bad day at sea. That's a crisis in the making. Now, let me share something that shocked even the industry experts. You know those tiny fish that tuna love to munch on? They're vanishing from their usual spots because the warming waters are messing with their whole ecosystem. Think of it like this. If your local grocery store suddenly moved 50 miles away, you'd probably change where you shop, right? That's exactly what's happening under the waves. No little fish means no big fish, and that's hitting the entire industry hard. The numbers don't lie. Wholesale prices have shot up 25% since January, and major players like Bumblebee and Starkist are sending out warning signals like crazy. The International Fishing Commission just slashed fishing quotas by 30% to protect what's left of the fish populations. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a shark bite. Necessary, but maybe too little, too late. Here's what's really keeping me up at night. This isn't just about our tuna sandwiches anymore. We're watching a domino effect that's reshaping entire ocean ecosystems. And those budget-friendly proteins that so many families rely on? They're becoming luxury items right before our eyes. But don't panic buy every can you see. That'll only make things worse. Instead, here's my personal strategy. When you spot a good deal, grab a reasonable extra amount. Think about your normal monthly usage and maybe add a bit more as a buffer. We're talking smart preparation, not doomsday prepping. And here's a pro tip I've learned from tracking these trends. Keep an eye on those lesser-known brands. While the big names are struggling, some smaller companies working with local fishing fleets are still managing to keep their prices relatively stable. They might not be the brands you're used to, but hey, sometimes the best discoveries come from trying something new. Number 7. Certain rice varieties. Let S talk about rice. And trust me, this one's gonna shock you because it hits everybody's dinner table. Remember when rice was that no-brainer, cheap staple you'd grab without even thinking? Those days are disappearing faster than cookies at a kid's party. Here's the wild part. Major rice-producing regions across Asia are battling what scientists are calling a perfect storm of disasters. We're talking about the worst droughts in 40 years. And get this, India, which usually feeds a third of the world's population with its rice, has slammed the brakes on exports. But wait, it gets crazier. Thailand, known as the world's rice bowl, is producing 40% less than last year. Their famous rice fields? Many are bone dry. And China, usually self-sufficient in rice, just made their biggest rice purchase in history, buying up huge amounts from Thailand and Vietnam. It's like watching a global game of musical chairs with rice bags. Now, let's get personal, because this affects what's on your plate. That fragrant jasmine rice you love in your stir-fry? The premium basmati that makes your curry perfect? These specific varieties are getting hit like a truck. I was at Costco last week, and for the first time ever they had signs. Maximum 3 bags per customer. The price tags? Hold on to your shopping cart. They've jumped 35% since last winter, and experts say we're just seeing the beginning. Here's where it gets really interesting, and honestly, kind of scary. Scientists at the International Rice Research Institute aren't just worried about next year, they're sounding alarm bells for the whole future of rice farming. Climate change is throwing a massive wrench in the works. In Vietnam's Mekong Delta, known as Asia's Rice Bowl, salt water is creeping into rice fields like an uninvited guest. Farmers who've grown rice for generations are watching their fields turn into salty wastelands. And those predictable monsoons that rice farmers could set their calendars by? They're about as reliable now as a weather app on a glitchy phone. But I'm not just here to give you bad news. I've got some practical tips. First, when you spot your favorite rice variety, especially basmati or jasmine, don't just grab one bag. Stock up smartly. Rice stores well for years if kept dry. Second, start exploring alternatives now, before you have to. Quinoa, farro, barley, they're not just trendy alternatives anymore. They're becoming necessity backups. And here's a pro tip. Look for American-grown rice varieties. States like Arkansas and California are ramping up production, and while they can't fill the global gap, they might be your best bet for stable supply. The rice situation is like a preview of how our food system is changing. It's not just about one ingredient, it's a wake-up call about how connected our food supply really is. And trust me, you'll want to stay ahead of this one. Number 8. Frozen vegetables. Let me tell you something wild about those frozen vegetables in your freezer. You know, the ones that save our dinners on busy weeknights. I've been diving deep into this industry, and what I'm seeing is honestly shocking. Remember when we could grab any bag of frozen broccoli or peas without thinking twice? Well, those days are slipping away faster than ice cream on a hot day. Here's the real story that's unfolding right now. Those massive processing facilities, imagine buildings the size of several football fields in places like Idaho and Washington State, are struggling big time. I'm talking about running at just 60% capacity. And it's not because they don't want to process more vegetables. They literally can't. These plants that used to hum 24/7 are now sitting idle for hours because there aren't enough skilled workers to run them. But hold on, because this gets even more interesting. You see, while demand for frozen veggies has exploded, we're talking a 35% jump since last year. The industry is facing what insiders call a perfect storm. The aging processing plants, many built back when we were rocking 80s hairstyles, are desperately needing upgrades. About 40% of these facilities are being forced to either modernize or shut down completely. Why? New environmental regulations are tightening the screws, demanding cleaner, more efficient operations. Let me paint you a picture of what's happening behind those closed factory doors. These aren't just simple conveyor belts we're talking about. Modern vegetable processing requires sophisticated flash freezing technology and highly trained operators. I recently chatted with a facility manager, let's call him Mike, who told me they're operating with half the staff they need. And these aren't jobs you can fill overnight. It takes months to train someone to properly operate these complex machines that keep our vegetables perfectly frozen while maintaining their nutrients. Here's where it hits your wallet and your dinner table. Those budget-friendly mixed vegetable bags that used to cost $2.99, they're becoming as rare as a quiet moment in a house with toddlers. The fancy stuff, those perfectly cut broccoli and cauliflower florets, they're next on the endangered list because they need extra careful handling. And those convenient steam-in-bag vegetables that have saved countless weeknight dinners, they might become a luxury item by February 2025. But I'm not here to just drop bad news on you. Here's my practical advice, based on tracking this industry closely. When you spot your favorite frozen vegetables, especially those family-sized bags, grab a reasonable amount. Don't go overboard. Your freezer isn't a storage unit, and these veggies typically stay good for about 8 months. Focus on the basics: peas, corn, mixed vegetables. These are your best bets for long-term availability. The silver lining? This situation is pushing companies to innovate. Some are experimenting with new preservation methods that could revolutionize how we store vegetables. Others are investing in automated systems that could help reduce labor needs. But until these solutions are fully implemented, we're in for some interesting times in the frozen food aisle. Number 9. Premium pet food brands. If you've got a furry friend at home, this one's going to hit close to heart. Premium pet food brands, the ones with real meat as the first ingredient, they're facing some serious trouble. Let me tell you what's actually happening behind the scenes. Those high-quality protein sources that make up your pet's favorite food, they're becoming incredibly scarce. I'm talking about wild-caught fish, free-range chicken, and grass-fed beef. Recent industry reports show that major pet food manufacturers are struggling with a 30% shortage in premium protein sources. But here's the real kicker. It's not just about the meat. Remember those special supplements and vitamins they add? Well, 3 of the largest vitamin suppliers for pet food companies have recently reported major production delays. One factory in Singapore, responsible for 40% of pet food vitamin premixes, had to shut down temporarily. And it gets worse. Those fancy grain-free formulas, the alternative ingredients they use, like sweet potatoes and lentils, are seeing price spikes of up to 45%. Small pet food companies are already starting to discontinue certain product lines. What does this mean for your pet? Those specific formulas your dog or cat loves might disappear from shelves. We're already seeing signs. Major retailers are limiting purchases to 2 bags per customer in some areas. Even big names like Blue Buffalo and Royal Canin are warning about possible recipe adjustments. Quick tip: if your pet is on a specific premium formula, consider talking to your vet now about possible alternatives. You might want to slowly transition them to a new food before their current favorite becomes hard to find. Number 10. Specific condiments. Now, comma. Let's dive into something that might shock you. Your favorite condiments are about to pull a disappearing act. And I'm not just talking about 1 or 2 fancy brands. The entire condiment industry is facing what industry experts are calling the perfect storm of shortages. Let me paint you a picture. Remember that sriracha shortage that had hot sauce lovers hoarding bottles? Well, that was just a preview of what's coming. I've been tracking agricultural reports and the numbers are stunning. Those vibrant chili pepper fields in Southeast Asia that supply most of our hot sauce makers, they're yielding 40% less than last year. Farmers in Thailand and Vietnam are literally watching their crops wither under record-breaking heat waves. We're talking temperatures that would make even a pepper sweat. But here's where it gets really interesting. And trust me, this affects way more than just your spicy favorites. The mustard situation? It's like watching a slow-motion train wreck. Those picturesque golden fields in Canada and France aren't so golden anymore. Mustard seed production has crashed to levels we haven't seen in 7 years. And here's the kicker that most people don't realize. These farmers can't just bounce back next season. It takes a full 2-year cycle to recover from a bad harvest. That's right. When you squeeze that mustard bottle in 2025, you're tasting the success, or failure, of farming decisions made in 2023. Now, let me share something I learned from an industry insider just last week. The big condiment companies, the ones with commercials during the Super Bowl, they're essentially playing Monopoly with raw materials. They're buying up everything they can get their hands on, leaving smaller manufacturers out in the cold. That amazing small batch hot sauce you discovered at the farmer's market? The maker might not be able to source ingredients at all soon. The numbers tell a brutal story. Distribution networks are reporting a 40% drop in order fulfillment for specialty condiments. Production costs have skyrocketed by 35% since last year, and many manufacturers are facing an impossible choice: either dramatically raise prices or significantly scale back production. Most are choosing to produce less rather than risk pricing themselves out of the market entirely. Here's a real-world example that hit close to home. A local hot sauce maker I've been following for years just announced they're suspending production of 3 of their 5 flavors. Why? Because the cost of their specialty peppers has tripled, and they can't even get guaranteed supply contracts anymore. And if you think switching to basic table condiments is the answer, I've got news for you. Even major manufacturers are quietly reducing their product lines, focusing only on their best sellers. Those unique flavors and limited editions you love? They're likely first on the chopping block. Pro tip from someone who's been watching this industry closely: if you spot your favorite condiments on store shelves, especially those small batch or specialty ones, don't wait for a sale. The price you're seeing today might be the best it's going to get for a long time. And some of these products, they might not make it back to shelves at all in 2025. Before I wrap this up, let's focus on what you really need to watch out for. Coffee and olive oil are going to be the first to disappear, followed closely by specialty condiments and premium chocolate. But here's the good news. You've got options. Start exploring local coffee roasters who source directly from farmers. Consider stocking up on shelf-stable alternatives like instant coffee or coffee concentrates. For cooking, grab some avocado or grapeseed oil. They're great alternatives to olive oil. And those specialty condiments? Learn to make simple versions at home. I've linked some easy recipes below. Look, I'm not telling you to panic buy. That only makes things worse. Instead, Be smart. Start building a flexible pantry now. Maybe grab one extra item each shopping trip. And here's my biggest tip. Build relationships with local producers and small shops. They'll be your best resource when these shortages hit. Don't forget to hit subscribe for more insider tips on navigating these grocery challenges. And drop a comment below telling me which item from this list surprised you the most. Stay prepared, stay calm, and I'll see you in the next video.